have on the line with us none other than one of our heroes of civil disobedience. We've got Stephen Brown on, who is the executive director of the Rhode Island American Civil Liberties Union. Stephen Brown, welcome back to the Coalition.
Thank you. I'm glad to be back with the Coalition, but just to correct the record, I appreciate being a hero, but whatever I'm a hero of, it's not civil disobedience. Civil liberties I'll take, but not civil disobedience.
All right. Now we have to start a whole new section of our website.
Exactly. Well, again, and when you go back to your appearance, one of our tenets has always been that everybody in this state needs the ACLU, whether they admit it or not, whether they like it or not. And this is a perfect moment that demonstrates to average Rhode Islanders the importance of the ACLU. Now, we've spent the first part of the show, and he's still with us in studio, Councilman Archetto, and discussing the build-up, if you will, to the magic moment we find ourselves in, where the great state of Rhode Island and the Rhode Island State Police have spent literally hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars, time, labor, sweat, blood, tears, analyzing the situation in the City of Cranston Police Department. Mayor Fung, who ran on a platform of transparency, doesn't really want us to read this, and seems to be invoking APRA, which is the legislation that covers the release of public records. So, in your own inimitable way, Mr. Brown, can you inform us and bring us up in the detail on basically why you think this might be hooey? And that's my words.
Sure, I'm happy to, but if you don't mind, I'd like to take a minute to just review what started all this. Mm-hmm. I know you've talked about it this evening, but I think people need to recognize just how serious this entire matter is. We're talking about two individuals who are elected representatives who took a vote on a very important public matter. And the idea that high-ranking members of the police department might take those votes and use them to punish their constituents, use police powers to punish their constituents, is really an incredibly disturbing scenario. And, this cannot and should not be shrugged off as just, politics as usual or anything like that. It's very scary to think that elected officials are thinking twice about how to vote for their constituents based on whether or not they may end up start getting tickets for jaywalking or harassment or anything else by the police. So I really just want to emphasize that the incident underlying the report it couldn't be more serious.
Have you seen, in your own opinion, in your tenure here in Rhode Island, have you seen behavior as egregious as this on a citywide level?
There have been lots of incidents. I'm not going to say that this is at the top, but I do think people do need to recognize just how very serious it really is. And that leads into your question to me, and that's why it's so important that the public be able to learn exactly what happened, what this independent investigation by the state police found. It is an incredibly important matter of public record. As you noted, hundreds of thousands of dollars apparently were spent investigating the matter. There were a whole host of incidents supposedly being investigated, dozens of people interviewed. And, once you go through all that, the public has a right to know what it all means, what was discovered as a result of this investigation. We agree with some of the members of the council who said that the report should be released immediately. We sent a letter to the mayor a few days ago asking him to immediately release the report. The mayor's initial reaction was he wanted to run the report by the Attorney General to see whether there were portions of the report that might not be disclosable under the Open Records Law. And that is just the wrong way to proceed. The Open Records Law, which is a very important statute, does have, unfortunately, some very broad exemptions. There are exemptions for what people call there's a so-called personnel exemption that largely exempts from public disclosure personally identifiable information about individuals. There's a relatively broad investigatory record exemption. There's an exemption for records relating to pending or possibly imminent litigation. So if you took it literally, if you went through all the exemptions in the open records law, it's quite possible that the mayor could decide to issue, I don't know how big this report is, but if it's 100 pages, you could get a report supposedly relying on the open records law, that had about 50 lines that were unredacted. He could allege, well, all this part has to do with investigatory matters, all this has to do with personnel. But that was the whole point of the report, to examine various personnel issues, to examine various investigations that had gone on. That's exactly what the report is all about. And we don't think the mayor should be trying to rely on the open records law, which, after all, is designed to open records, as a way to keep the public from seeing this report, which is really what it boils down to. And what's important to keep in mind, and this is what we noted in our letter to the mayor, is that the open records law has all these exemptions, but the exemptions are discretionary, which means it's up to the public body to decide whether they want to disclose information, even if they might actually have the ability under one of these exemptions to keep particular information private. They have the right to. So it sets a floor, and the public body can say, well, maybe this would fall under one of the exemptions, but we think it's very important as a matter of public record, and we want to release it, and they have the right to under the law.
That's the irony here, though. Isn't he asking for permission that he himself can give to himself? I mean,
that's right. And one of the things we pointed out, in his, in saying he wanted to have the Attorney General review it. Well, first of all, that would take weeks and probably months. So this report would be kept secret for an incredibly long period of time, awaiting an opinion from the Attorney General. But at the end of the day, when the Attorney General came back to him and said, these are portions of the record that you would have a right to withhold, it's still up to him to decide whether he wants to withhold them or not, even if he had the right to. So it makes no sense to go through this convoluted process. As I said, it would extend the period of secrecy for possibly months, and
at least until Kilmartin gets back from Florida.
Right. Well, I mean, ultimately, this is an advisory that his own municipal attorney could give. The town solicitor would be able to give him, and really bring the whole thing to an end. And at the same time, when you couple that with his attempt to divulge the report in executive session at the town council meeting, which fortunately the town council saw right through as just an attempt again to put this under behind closed doors, the behavior smacks of not a desire to protect individuals in the report, it's a desire to protect himself. And that's where, as a civil libertarian or a fan of real civil libertarians like yourself, that's what I find so maddening. And that's why, and by the way, one need only go to riaclu.org. There is a link right on the front page where it goes into great detail, the logic and the rationale, and a pretty cogent, one of the best explanations of the intent of APRA that I've seen put out to the general public, to understand both the argument and the value of what the ACLU can do at moments like this. So, I mean, what's your prediction? I mean, I know you're not big on predictions.
Can I just jump in here? So I have a semi-related question here. And one of the things that struck me about this whole Ticketgate thing and the report that came out is in the city of Cranston, the executive, the mayor, Alan Fong, functions as the public safety commissioner of the city as well. We have the same situation up my way in Woonsocket, where the mayor is the acting public safety director. And maybe this is more of a common cause question than an ACLU question. But, Steve, I just would like to get your take on, the kind of dangers of overlapping those two positions in particular when it comes to, day-to-day operations of a city.
That is a very good question. I think another organization like Common Cause might be able to better answer it. But I think the point you're making is a legitimate one. Certainly it's important that the roles be spelled out very clearly to avoid potential conflicts like the ones we're talking about. I'm not prepared to say that there's, it's inherently bad to have the mayor also serve in that capacity. But you're absolutely right to point out the potential problems. And, in this particular instance, though, I'm not sure whether, how much that plays into this. I think it's more just of the mayor refusing to let the public see information from a report that he himself commissioned as a result of public pressure.
Mr. Brown, or Councilman Archetto's got a quick question for you.
Not a question, just a comment. Mr. Brown, I just want to thank you and your organization for all that you've done to help the residents of Cranston and bring open government back to Cranston. So thank you, Mr. Brown.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that.
So you'll continue to be on top of this issue. Any predictions? How do you think this movie ends?
Well, I don't know. I think it will depend a lot on the city council. I think they do have the ability to put pressure on the mayor to make sure that this report does in fact become public. I have to think that in light of all the attention it has gotten, at some point, and I can't say at what point that will be, but at some point this has to be public. There's just too much interest in it. There are too many key issues of governance involved in what happened, what is now going to happen based on the investigation. I just can't see this being kept sealed for very long. And the question is whether it will come out voluntarily or whether the mayor will be, kicking and screaming when it gets released. I certainly hope it's the former. It's hard to argue with the point that members of the public, certainly all the residents of Cranston, but I would argue statewide, the voters and residents of the state have a right to know what happened, what has been going on, and whether there are serious issues that now need to be addressed. Because if you don't see the report, if you don't see the investigation, you're in no position to decide, are things being corrected? Are actions being taken to make sure that something like this doesn't happen again? We can only speculate if we don't see the report itself, and that's another reason it's absolutely critical that the council, residents of Cranston, and everybody else be able to see and then be able to follow through and see if steps are taken to prevent something like this from happening again.
Well, excellent. Again, you've been listening to Stephen Brown, Executive Director of the Rhode Island ACLU. You can find his opinions and his organization's opinions on issues confronting Rhode Islanders at riaclu.org, a must-read website if you live in Rhode Island. Stephen, again, thank you so much for gracing us with your appearance today.
Thank you, and thank you, too, Counselor, for the work you're doing to try to get this public as well.
Thank you, Steve.
Bye now.
Take care, Stephen.
So we've only got about 6 or 7 minutes left, and let's jump right into the next issue. You've got a policeman who was put on administrative leave, was compensated the entire time, is now
back on the force.
Back on the force.
Promoted major.
Promoted major, so he'll retire nicely with a pension and full sick pay in a negotiated settlement that it's been reported the state police found so concerning that this is based on published reports, that the state police found so concerning that they actually asked Mayor Fung whether or not he was being extorted by said police. I mean, no one can answer that question because, well, we haven't seen the report. At the same time,
we got the Cliff Notes.
All right. At the same time, you've got, there was an allegation of sexual discrimination. There was a good cop, if you will, who was put on the sidelines, who, by all accounts, was doing a fine job as, I believe he was the head of internal affairs. All right. So you've got that. Now he's back in.
Well, allegations of hiring third-party investigators the list goes on and on. The hits keep coming. You know?
So again, what's fascinating for me is that you would think if none of this were true, Mr. Fung would want this report released.
Logically, that's correct.
Right, because at this point, it is so Nixonian that you almost wonder, is it a fair characterization from your personal opinion that Mayor Fung essentially ran his own private police department within a police department to protect his own political interests?
that's the way it looks. But we need to see the report. But I must say, you hit upon something I'd like to comment on.
Sure.
Major paddle